Hello. Welcome all to New Hampshire Peace Action's Peace and Justice Conversation Series online. I'm Will Hopkins. I'm the director of New Hampshire Peace Action. In case you're new to our organization, New Hampshire Peace Action educates, mobilizes, and organizes to build a more peaceful and just future for all. We envisage a future where international relations are based on cooperation instead of competition and conflict, and where mutual benefit and shared security lead to a more peaceful and just global community. The corona pandemic spurred us to start this bi-weekly conversation series as a way to continue our public education work. And we found it so effective that we've decided to continue on indefinitely, regardless of corona. The bi-weekly nature of it has been really great as far as helping us engage and sort out how we're going to make the changes that we've been yearning for. Before we go too much further, I would like to, in the spirit of understanding and respect, acknowledge that we're doing our work here in New Hampshire on the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. And I want to honor with gratitude the land and waterways that they've been stewarding through the generations. So tonight, we are very excited to be bringing Sarah Wilton and her talk on the new Cold War. And Sarah is one of New Hampshire, the New Hampshire peace community's kind of hidden treasures. She served in the US Navy all the way up to a full commander and worked in the Department of Defense. And between those works, she worked for over 30 years. And her specialty was Russian-Soviet military politics. And she was a part of shaping the policies at the height of the Cold War that led us into detente and the nuclear arms treaty regiment that was in place 10, 15 years ago that has largely fallen apart. And I know in our work here in New Hampshire, Sarah has been a consistent voice for strategic campaigns that focus on getting that treaty regiment back into place. And so we're so excited to have you, Sarah. You're such a valuable asset to New Hampshire's peace movement, and it's great to have you on tonight. Go ahead and take it away.
Well, okay, thank you. Well, I hope I do your presentation. You're welcoming justice. Some of you I've already met, but for those, again, I'm Sarah, and it's great to be here. Am I using the screen share properly?
It is not up yet, so I just go through the same steps.
I see it on mine. Okay, hold on. Sorry, there will be a little delay. Okay, now how do I do that again? Okay,
so center your screen, share screen, and then you should see the PowerPoint presentation on your options there.
Okay, I need to open the PowerPoint again. Sorry, people. Okay. Okay, just a second. Sorry, whiteboard.
It should just be share screen, and then you should be able to pick it from that. But if it's a problem, we can also share it from mine. I have your PowerPoint open here, so I can share from my screen if that's easier. Just tell me when to click through, and I will.
Okay, I'll just say click. Okay.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Okay. I wanted to give you a brief background of my, there I am. Can you see it, everybody? I wanted to give you some of my background, okay? I grew up in Oklahoma, graduated from, next screen. There. I grew up in Oklahoma and graduated from Officer Candidate School, or OCS, in the early 70s. My father a keen native commissioned me, as shown here. My OCS class was the last to be segregated along gender lines. And as at that time, the US military was abolishing the draft and integrating women into roles that heretofore were reserved for their male counterparts, to include sea duty. Next screen. These are some pictures from my naval service. One of my first assignments was to administratively process returning prisoners of war from Vietnam. I also was the first woman officer to be assigned to the Naval School of Diving and Salvage, whereas I was an administrative and supply officer. My pictures appeared in Navy recruiting brochures. I got out of active duty after the first 4 years to find a career that fulfilled my passion for history and political science and remain in the Washington, D.C. area. So the first year after active duty, I worked on Capitol Hill. And through night school, I took Russian language classes at area universities and some language immersion opportunities offered by the government. I also began graduate studies at Georgetown University. Next screen. After working on Capitol Hill for a year, I worked for a Washington, D.C. think tank and then migrated to a government job in military intelligence. Here is my career trajectory. Next screen. Okay, most rewarding about military intelligence was the field of current intelligence, where I was the first line of interpretation of current events received through classified or intelligence channels. Senior executives and decision makers often sought my opinions, which were provided in writing or extemporaneously. The downside of these assignments was that I often worked 12-hour days that started at or before 6 a.m. When the Soviet Union collapsed, I migrated to a counter-drug account, which was a day job with more reasonable hours and away from the Pentagon. This account was a disappointment because I believed whatever drug problems the US had were domestic or demand side and not supply side, as per the war on drugs. Still, as colleagues told me, I could either flip hamburgers at McDonald's and lose my pension, salary, and savings, or I could work the counter drug account. So I tried to make lemonade out of lemons and developed research to look at drug transit from Peru through Brazil on the Amazon River. Some of my research took me back to naval intelligence and a merchant ship analyst that many of you's name may recognize, Jonathan Pollard, who was then or became an Israeli spy. He was just released this past year from his prison sentence, and he emigrated to Israel. Anyway, I put my passion into this Amazon River research, and when it was finally done, my chain of command wouldn't publish it because they hadn't seen any evidence for my predictions. Even after a year later, when the largest drug seizure in Brazil had come from drugs smuggled on merchant ships from the Amazon River, and as my paper had predicted, my chain of command still wouldn't publish. my research. So this became an epiphanal moment. Even more epiphanal was years later when I was depressed or feeling sorry for myself and lamenting this experience to a colleague who said, next screen, Sarah, this will date me, bear with me. Did you ever see the television series, The Naked City, which was a crime drama about New York City in the late 50s and early 60s? He went on, at the end of every series, they would say this: there are 8 million stories in the naked city. This has been one of them. Well, my friend said, DIA is like the naked city. Every one of us has a story like yours. So anyway, next screen. With the counter-drug research drama, I volunteered to be on the Native American Program Council, where I chaired that program and organized the first Native American cultural awareness ceremony. Here I am with the Navajo code talkers whose story you need to read. They were instrumental in the US war in the Pacific because their language was used for message transmission. But yet, the Japanese couldn't understand it. But yet, they weren't allowed to carry rifles. Anyway, they gave a presentation at DIA to a standing room only crowd and received a standing ovation, which they well deserved. Anyway, next slide. Anyway, General Clapper, later to become President Obama's Director of National Intelligence, recognized my work. And I was transferred out of counter drugs and served in production management, and then on the conventional armed forces in Europe treaty account, where I went on an arms control inspection to Bulgaria. When 9/11 happened, we were all mobilized to support the war on terror and the war on Iraq. And there were so many people on those counts. I kind of did my best to avoid trying to contribute to the violence. I entered a government and politics doctoral program at the University of Maryland to study international relations. Anyway, next slide. So in 2006, I signed my retirement papers at the DIA, returned home, and attended a counter-recruiting demonstration at the nearby high school. Okay, now we're going to talk about the Cold War. Next slide. This is my trajectory. Next slide. Almost a year ago, we lost Professor Stephen F. Cohen. Okay. One of the US foremost scholars on Russian and Soviet history. Okay. I'm thinking, well, you don't have the latest of my slides. Let me try to get the other one. Can I try to get the other presentation up?
Yeah, try. Go for it.
Okay. Screen share. What do I have to do?
So once you've
Okay.
clicked on screen share at the bottom center of the screen, you should see your PowerPoint there.
Oh,
if
here
it's
it
open.
is. Okay, here it is.
There
Okay.
you go. You got it.
Can you see it?
Sure
Okay,
can.
okay, I want you to see Cohen's. Okay, there we are. Sorry about that. Okay. Almost a year ago, we lost Professor Stephen F. Cohen, one of the U.S. foremost scholars on Russian and Soviet history. A critic of Russiagate, Cohen's views were rarely, if ever, presented by corporate news outlets. Even Democracy Now! Only had him on in 2017. Rather than debate his questions or arguments, he was smeared as being a Putin puppet, a toady, or a Russian stooge. His treatment, like his passing, was to our detriment. So let's look at the current world order's origins, which were solidified in the aftermath of World War II. Okay. Often omitted in the triumphalism emerging from World War II is the fact that the U.S. alone among its
So we did have a warning, folks, that sometimes Sarah's internet is a little unstable. So hopefully she'll be back with us in just a moment. Understand they just invented the internet in Keene, so it's a little slower than it might be in the rest of the state.
Will, tell her she's muted.
Sarah, you back? We lost you and you're muted now. So thanks, Herb.
Okay.
All right, you'll have to redo the screen share.
Sorry. Share screen.
Just part of doing program over the internet is sometimes you have tech issues, so don't sweat it.
Okay. Okay. While forgetting the U.S. cities weren't invaded or partisans or citizens that were relocated or executed for being part of partisan movements. When the Red Army marched west through Belarus and Poland on the way to Berlin, they encountered German trains loaded with Soviet children bound for Germany. The Germans referred to the Slavic people as subhuman, and when the Germans were driven out of the Western Soviet Union, they applied the scorched earth policy, meaning they destroyed whatever they couldn't steal and take with them. Of the many World War II casualties, the USSR lost a total of 27 million military and civilians, which contrasts to the 400,000 military casualties lost by the US. So the US alone was in a position to shape the World War II's aftermath. But planning for the post-World War II order occurred well before even Pearl Harbor. This is a recent book by Stephen Wertheim that this research and presentation is based on. Though much of its Anglo-centric philosophy dates from the late 19th century, Wertheim dates the post-World War II planning of foreign policy elites to the fall of France in 1940. Key among this foreign policy philosophy was Anglocentrism, the US in the lead, supported by the Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and even South Africa and their global naval bases. Okay. Legitimacy would be required to gain public acceptance, and this was the role
I think we lost her again.
We sure did.
Um,
Sorry about this, folks. I think she'll be right back. Let's just.
maybe we can remind people that the chat box is there if questions are coming to you, that hopefully Sarah will be back, and along with the presentation, we'll have some time to answer questions.
Here's hoping. All right, Sarah's back. Once you've unmuted Sarah, hopefully we can. All right, hopefully this is hopefully the internet is kind to us from here.
Okay. Let me think. Oh, here. Can you see it? Okay. Keep in mind that the purpose of the world order was wealth generation and preservation. But force is, and will be required to preserve and build this system of wealth. And the difference between colonialism and neo-colonialism is that in the case of the latter, your subjects are controlled by a puppet government rather than a viceroy. Okay, here is a picture of the enforcement mechanisms of this Anglo-centric world order. Naval power is key, but to a lesser extent, it's air power, a technology
Sorry about this, folks. Looks like the internet's really slowing this one down, but bear with us. Hopefully Sarah will be right back and we can get through. All right, not seeing her jump back on, folks. Do we have, I will just take this moment to say that once she is back, when we start the Q&A, you can choose to either enter your questions in the chat, or you can put your questions. You can put an asterisk in the chat, and I can recognize you. Either one is fine by me. Usually, folks prefer to type their questions in the chat and let me read them off, but some people like to do it themselves, and you're welcome to do it either way.
Will, would it help in the bandwidth issue if we stop all our videos individually and just leave her video on?
Not usually.
Actually, the other way around.
Yeah, her video might be. It might be good to turn her video off.
Yeah, so that's a good idea, Herb. We just the opposite way.
Will she still be able to project her screen without
Should
that?
be able to.
Okay. Just a thought.
That's a great question. We'll find out.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
I think she can. I think she can turn video off and do the screen. And it should use significantly less bandwidth. So let's bear with it for a few moments, and hopefully she'll come right back. You know what? While we're waiting, folks on the chat today, we are always thinking about new topics to cover. So if there are people you know of who you'd like to have as part of the conversation series, or topics that you haven't seen us cover that you'd like to hear about, feel free to stick those in the chat, or even while we're waiting for Sarah to return, feel free to just shout them out. And if there are things or people, I know Arnie Alpert a couple of weeks ago talked to me and said he really wants to hear from U.S. labor, people who worked with U.S. labor against war, in particular about the issue of how labor and peace activists sometimes have a stressed relationship because of the reality that Pentagon contracts frequently create union jobs. And Arnie thought it would be really interesting to hear folks from U.S. labor against war. And so I'm looking into those right now, but we're always on the hunt for new topics, although we've got a good lineup coming your way. Will, you want to jump in?
Well, yeah, two things. Number one, I tried to interest the past president of the New Hampshire AFL-CIO with labor against war. I didn't get too far. But anyway, in the reality of the day right now, Afghanistan, there are a significant number, I believe, of Afghan people in New Hampshire, including one state rep. I forget her name. Somebody knows her name. The state rep. No? Yeah.
I know her. I can picture her face.
Yeah,
She's come to our events.
And
I can't think of her name.
Sophia was there.
There it is.
Yeah,
Thank you, Janet.
Okay, yeah. So in terms of the situation obviously is current, and I'm sure will be ongoing for some time. And of course it's not just Afghanistan, but the countries involved, Pakistan and Iran, and I mean, this leads into maybe Janet's topic in terms of the new Cold War. I think Afghanistan was part of that, actually. Anyway, so that's a thought.
Thanks, Will. I'll check in with Sophia. She is a Peace Action member. She's come to some of our events over the years, and I bet she'd give a really great presentation. And it is timely. So maybe we could squeeze it in sometime soon. Although, you know that we're at least out until October in our planning.
Will, do you want to maybe give people that preview of what we do have coming up?
Sure. Since Sarah's still not here, let's go through some of our programs. Let me just open up that spreadsheet. So our next few programs, which I will not repeat in the closing. August 30th, 2 weeks from today, Nuran Al-Hamdan, who's a young Palestinian American woman who's been doing work on the seacoast, will be presenting on Palestine. September 9th, which is not a Monday, it's a Thursday, we'll be having a discussion on the film Third Harmony about the effectiveness of nonviolent resistance. And we're hoping to have an interesting discussion. There will be a 48-hour license for that film, so you'll get the link for the film 2 days before, and then you can watch it anytime during that period, and we'll gather for a discussion on September 9th. September 13th, Diane Stradling is going to be presenting on Cuba. She's taken a few human relation trips to Cuba and has a presentation on what's going on in Cuba, how the embargo has affected them. September 20th, Will Thomas, who's here with us right now, will present with Sandra Yarney, and they're going to talk about the work of the Palestine Education Network, which is a special project of New Hampshire Peace Action that's been doing work on Palestine for the last at least decade and a half. Will, is there about that long, maybe a little longer?
Yeah, I wasn't in at the beginning, but I think Sandra was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now we're scheduled. We've finished scheduling through October, and there are a few different topics. We've got an update from our national. We've got we're gonna have a presentation on Freedom Summer and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. We'll have a presentation hopefully from Judith LeBlanc, although I don't have confirmation from her yet, on the work around the country to be done to create an Indigenous Peoples Day. And then we've always got a few conversations in process that aren't confirmed yet, don't have their dates nailed down, but do be sure, if you enjoy these kinds of conversations, to join us every other Monday. I'm wondering if maybe the internet has not, I don't know how long we want to give.
Will?
Yep.
Can you call her?
I can give that a shot.
Why don't you do that? I'll tell people a little more about the annual fundraiser coming up, because we really want to get the word out. We had originally planned it for in-person at the Puritan, but we have changed our minds because of shifting realities with the pandemic. So we are going to do it on Zoom. So we want to make sure everyone, gets that, because we originally did say it was going to be in person. So we want to make sure people know. And our speaker is going to be Phyllis Bennis, who we know a lot of you already know and listen to and follow her work. We haven't had her here in New Hampshire for a while, so we're really excited to be able to have to hear from her. Let's see, I'm checking here. It's going to be on Friday, October 1st, and I believe we decided, I'm just looking it up, 5:30 p.m. will be the start time. And you know how it is on Zoom, we're going to start with like some breakout sessions so people can do the networking thing and have some sense of it being a community, not just, have a little bit of that conversation and connection. And then we'll hear from her, and her topic, is not exactly, well, she'll be speaking, well, let me just tell you who she is. She directs the New Internationalism Project, focusing on the Middle East, US wars, and she helped to found the US Campaign for Palestinian Rights, now serves on the National Board of Jewish Voice for Peace. So there's a lot of issues that are of great interest to all of you here that she can and will speak to.
I would love to say about Phyllis, and I think this might be the end. I was not able to reach Sarah. I don't have her number in my phone, so we may have to cut this short, and we will try to get a recording of this that we can send out to folks. We'll see if we can get Sarah to make a recording of it. Oh, here she comes.
Will, can I just interject quickly? You were talking
Sure.
about labor movements and so forth. And 2 weekends ago, I videotaped a group of Clamshell Alliance members, with Rennie Cushing, and the group there just had such unbelievable stories about labor union movements and stuff. And I've got it all on video. I haven't got that third video yet up and edited, but the one with Rennie and in the circle, and you all know Rennie's health situation, I'm sure. It's really kind of moving. And then Paul, I'm drawing a blank on his last name, gave a wonderful sort of analysis of the state of nuclear power and nuclear legislation. So that's another video. It's on my YouTube channel. If you just Google Herb Moyer videographer on YouTube, you'll find the videos I have. And one last thing. This morning, it was last night's program, Christian Alman-Parr and Company had a wonderful interview with who did All in the Family, who's the guy that did all the sitcoms and stuff. He had a wonderful—
Norman Lear.
Norman Lear.
Rob Reiner.
Yeah, no, Norman Lear had a wonderful kind of analysis of how he came to bring so many issues to America. It's really great. Aman-Parr. She has some great guests. So that's
nice. All right. Well, I'll follow up with you on that. But Sarah's back, so let's get back on track. Sarah, take it away. Hopefully it'll work out this time.
Okay. Do I need to do screen share again?
Yeah, you'll have to.
Okay. Okay. Here we go. Got it?
You're back up. Look good.
Okay. A 2019 documentary, Coup 53, is based upon recently released archival information on how the British and US intelligence worked to overthrow the Iranian democratically elected prime minister. To install the Shah of Iran, who was a US puppet. Okay. I just saw this. It was the Coup 53 came out in 2019. It's well worth seeing. Anyway, next. It's interesting to point out that for centuries, colonialism has been rationalized by arguing that it is done to benefit the victims of this kind of intervention, which is ethnocentric. So how does the world order relate to Russian-US relations? When the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 1990s, Boris Yeltsin became president. Both US political parties greeted the collapse with the same triumphalism in the that was in the aftermath of World War II. And it seemed that the Soviet Union collapse was validation of this world order. Yeltsin was not popular in Russia and presided over the collapse of the Soviet Union economy and other domestic crises. A close friend of Bill Clinton, Yeltsin employed a US heart surgeon that Clinton recommended, as well as US economists, to facilitate Russian economic restructuring. And US political consultants to facilitate what Stephen Cohen called the 1996 rigged election in Russia. Yeltsin's greatest crisis was in foreign policy and the NATO intervention in Yugoslavia. Keep in mind that Russians have a great affinity for Serbia, and there's
So Sarah, if you can hear me, we've lost you again. Maybe try turning off your video, something we should have mentioned when you came back, that you can keep your screen shared, but turn your video off, and that might help with the connectivity issues. Well, folks, we've been remarkably lucky through this conversation series to not have this kind of tech problem often. The internet's usually been pretty reliable for our speakers, but tonight it has been a bumpy ride, and I apologize for that. Let's give Sarah a couple minutes, and if she doesn't come back, I'll close. What I was about to say when Sarah came back on was that Phyllis Bennis is somebody whose writing in particular is absolutely invaluable to people like me. I spend most of my time organizing and answering emails and doing the day-to-day nuts and bolts of running a nonprofit. But I also, because of the nature of our work, have to have a good understanding of foreign policy. And Phyllis Bennis's primers are well under 100 pages, an easy hour read, and they really get to the core of what U.S. foreign policy is, why it's done the way it is, and how and why we should change it. So I'm really excited to have Phyllis Bennis. I consider her one of the greatest minds in foreign policy today. And we haven't talked much about what she's going to talk about, but I can say that there aren't a lot of people out there who are as brilliant and coherent and have as deep an understanding of foreign policy as Phyllis does. Debbie, how can we access the reports? Which reports? You mean the primers that Phyllis has written?
Yeah.
So I would say go to the New Internationalism Project, and you can see most of them there. Her primers are available through her publisher, and I don't remember who that is off the top of my head, but you should be able to find them through the New Internationalism Project.
Oh, New Internationalism.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Will,
Go ahead, Will.
somebody told me, I haven't seen it yet, Andrew Basovich, who also was a featured speaker at one of our Peace Action fundraisers.
26th annual.
Huh? 6th annual.
26th, the year after Phyllis.
Okay. He has an op-ed or whatever in the Boston Globe that deals with Afghanistan. Does anybody, I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to. And he's also, I think, I would consider an expert on foreign policy, US foreign policy. And yeah, his books, his columns, and now he's working for not the Brookings Institute, the Kurt, remember that? I forget.
I don't know where Basovich is at this point, but he's a former colonel.
Yeah, Vietnam.
Yeah, really solid, solid voice.
He was at Boston University.
Also someone.
For a while.
Yeah.
Huh?
Also someone we ought to have up in the near future if we can.
I wanted to say, I just put a link in the chat to the New Internationalism website. It's kind of their main page, and if you scroll down a little bit, you'll immediately see Phyllis's recent articles. There's one about, well, there's more than one here actually, about Afghanistan. Oh yeah, these are all her articles. Oh no, it's not just her, but there's a bunch by her. So I highly recommend checking out that link to find out more about what she's talking about and what's going on in the world from her perspective, a perspective that many of us deeply respect. So,
Thank you.
sure.
I would say that if you're short on time and want to understand foreign policy really well, Phyllis Bennis is an incomparable resource for that. All right, folks, I think we ought to call it, unfortunately. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get Sarah to record her presentation and we'll put it online. Unfortunately, it looks like we're not going to have an opportunity for Q&A, but if you want links in the chat will be sent out tomorrow by Doreen. So those links will be there. And we'll see if we can turn this into a recorded presentation at another time. And I apologize deeply to everybody who pre-registered. Sarah's back, so I'm not apologizing yet, actually. Sarah got here just at the right moment. Sarah, why don't you try keeping your video off this time? Sometimes the data from your video is the largest sucker of those resources. So maybe try just PowerPoint and voice and see if that works out any better.
She's got to unmute herself first.
Sarah, can you unmute and then turn off your video? I might be able to do that for her.
I didn't know my video was on.
Oh yeah, well, just we can see your face. There you go. All right, and try screen sharing and see if that works better. Maybe we won't lose you if we're sucking a little less of your bandwidth.
Okay. Okay.
Looks good.
Okay, we're on the NATO intervention in Yugoslavia. Okay, the war in Yugoslavia still hasn't been reconciled, and only the countries in green are those countries that recognize independent Kosovo. Also, the US and the British were accused of ecocide because they used cluster bombs and depleted uranium. And last year, the Croatian president was arrested for crimes against humanity and charged for the crimes he committed while NATO was bombing Serbia. Keep in mind that this NATO intervention was the first time NATO was used offensively, and it was a violation of both the UN and the NATO charters. Now, look at this map. These are the countries in blue that recognize Juan Guaido as president of Venezuela. And you see the similarities. Okay. Now, as I said, Boris Yeltsin resigned December 31st, 1999, and it was precipitated by this war in Yugoslavia. Putin had only been in office less than 2 years when 9/11 happened, yet he was the first head of state to call President Bush and Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice to offer condolences. These are he proposed these to George Bush less than 2 weeks later. He wanted to share information, and he facilitated U.S. use of air bases in Central Asia and these other measures to support the coalition war on Afghanistan. You never hear about this. Finally, but despite this initiative by President Putin, Less than 2 months later, George W. Bush withdrew from the ABM treaty. Now, Cohen considers this one of the 3 measures the US was taking to gain nuclear superiority over Russia. The other 2 measures being NATO expansion and upgrading US nuclear weapons. In early 2000, the people of Russia gave this memorial to the people of the US. It's called the Teardrop Memorial, and it's to the victims to the struggle against world terrorism, to the victims everywhere of world terrorism. Putin came to the United States in 2005 for its dedication, and Bill Clinton was present. Putin was there for the groundbreaking. Bill Clinton was there for the dedication. But the response from the US in general was somewhat arrogant, in that Foreign Policy magazine labeled this as on its list of the world's ugliest statues. So anyway, but you never hear about this. So Putin was an ardent advocate, and he still is, except probably not now, but he had been an ardent advocate of US-Russian cooperation in the struggle against international terrorism. Okay. Both Russia and China vetoed the 2003 UN Security Council resolution to invade Iraq. Okay, during early 2000, Putin concentrated a lot on Russian domestic issues, like investing in infrastructure. He turned around Russia's declining life expectancy, and he has enjoyed very high popularity to the present day. It's roughly between 60 and 80%, depending upon the year. Okay, but in 2007, he gave a pivotal speech at the 2007 Munich Security Conference. People consider this as pivotal in the decline of US bilateral relations. Okay, people, when
Well, it looks like having her video off helped, but
Not enough.
Right. This is so frustrating. She's giving this utterly fascinating presentation, hanging on every word, and they keep stopping.
Yeah. What happened? Sarah, what happened?
I do want to point out that we had another presentation on Russia that you can access. Maybe Will can look up the
Sure.
link.
So I can put the YouTube link in. You can
Yeah.
find any of our past presentations on the website under the live stream tab. Just scroll down. But I'll get the link for the other Russia presentation right now.
Yeah, Bruce Gagnon from Maine spoke. He's been to Russia relatively recently, working on keeping connections between actual people in both countries. And he had some similar, he was talking about some different things, but it really fits in a lot with what Sarah's been discussing, and is really worth checking out for more information on this, starting again with how Russia, World War II, they were very important, and they suffered terribly, and they haven't forgotten that, but we clearly have. So there's this whole history, and I guess what I once again get from it, as I do every day, there's no reason for us to be enemies. There's no reason at all for the people of our two countries to be against each other. We're just not. Will, did you find
Yeah, let's go ahead and close it for tonight, folks. I'm going to put that link in the chat. That's the other Russia presentation we had. Again, apologies for the tech problems. I will get with Sarah and see if we can make a recording from a more stable internet source so that we can get a smooth copy of her presentation, and we'll make sure that everybody here gets that link. Yeah, good night, folks. Sorry about that.